Hello and happy Friday to all of my beautiful book lovers. For those of you who are new, my name is Sydney and I'm a shawty that reads. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out on future literary content. So in my last video, I shared with you guys my tips and tricks on how to improve your reading skills. One of the tips I included was to annotate. So in today's video, I'm going to explain how to annotate effectively. Effectively is the key word here because I think that when we hear the word annotate, we think of 12th grade English. And I know, just probably like the rest of us, I was just writing anything down to get that A. It's like, let me just fill up this book with notes so she knows that I'm annotating. But instead of doing that and wasting your time trying to think of something to write down, I'm going to share with you how to do it effectively. That way you're saving your time, your professor's time, everybody's time is saved. Okay. I'm going to start with what not to do, just so we get that out of the way. How not to annotate, featuring my personal copy of 1984 from high school, from 12th grade English class. So as you can see, I did make a decent amount of notes in this book. I annotated pretty well just from looking at it, right? But if you go in and see what I was actually saying in these notes, none of it really shows that I understood the information or that I was retaining the information or that I was really working with it, because I basically just wrote down every thought that was going through my head. Like, so true. Wow, Winston's a rebel. What else did I... Keeps getting distracted. Like, none of these notes really have anything to do with what 1984 is about. So if I were to annotate this differently, I do remember making a key at the beginning of this book, because my teacher told us what the main themes were. Okay, and that's her helping us and holding our hand. So if you know what the main themes are, which in this book are freedom, lack of freedom, hate, surveillance, and knowledge, which is what I wrote down, then you would go through and you would really only underline things that signify freedom, surveillance, knowledge, or whatever it is that you think the book signifies, instead of going through and writing down a reaction to every single thing that the author is saying. Because in a book like this, it's a little bit longer. I don't know how many pages this is. In a 300-page book, there's not going to be significance on every single page. And I think at the time I thought that I had to find significance on every page, but that's not the case. You have to look for it. And that's the part of annotating. It's like studying, you know? And I know I want to make it fun for you guys. It's really fun for me, but I don't want annotating to always be something that reminds you of George Orwell and you stressing to get an A. So I'm going to show you how to annotate with different kinds of books as well, because that's fiction. But if you're not reading fiction, if you're reading self-help, if you're reading short stories, there's going to be a better way to tackle the annotations. The first book I want to go over with you guys is The Color Purple by Alice Walker, just because I pray to God this is required reading for some students. I know it's not in private school apparently, but I really hope it's required reading. This is such an amazing book. Anyway, this isn't a book review. The way I would annotate this book is I would go through and skim. Okay, I think you should do that with any book, really. It's kind of just go through and skim and get an idea. So when you first open up this book, at the beginning of every chapter, every single one, it starts with Dear God, right there, Dear God. And then as you go forward, it'll say Dear Celie, Dear Nettie. Those are obviously two main characters in the book. But as you go on, you realize that the narrative is being told via letters. Once you know that, you can kind of think, okay, God is very important to Celie. Her sister Nettie is very important to her, and she's writing letters to them. Letters tend to be pretty intimate because you're just writing down exactly how you feel, and who you're sending them to says a lot as well. So these are two people that she's going to open up to the most, I'm assuming, and the two people that she trusts the most, just off top, just from looking through. So now once you understand that, and you start reading the book, you can kind of start analyzing Celie's relationship with other characters in the book. And then at that point, you can start writing down main characters and how they all come together and how the author is using these characters to tell whatever story it is that she's trying to tell. And this book is all about love, the love of life, and sisterhood and friendship. Really, that's what I think this whole book is about. It's beautiful. So once you do that, you obviously have to start taking notes in the book. I don't want to get anyone in trouble because I don't know what teachers and professors are doing right now or requiring. But if you don't want to write in the margins of your book, I really don't see a big deal in writing down a page number and then just taking notes on that. And I actually feel like you could get a better grade in that case and understand it better because you're really taking the time to be able to write down more instead of trying to get in, all the significance in a margin. But at least in this book, so you have to, figure out the best way to do it. In this book, I would read every chapter and then annotate at the end because there's a lot of space here at the end of almost every chapter. So I would do that. And then at least this way you could do like a paragraph of the significance of this chapter specifically. So that's how I would do this one. The next book I want to go over with you guys is Hitting a Straight Lick with a Crooked Stick by Zora Neale Hurston. So these are short stories, and this is where we get into tackling the annotating a little bit differently depending on the content that you're reading, because a short story is generally going to be about 20 to 25 pages max. This is telling you as the reader that there's going to be a lot more significance packed into the story and the characters that you need to be looking out for, as opposed to the 300-page novel where the author doesn't need to necessarily drop dimes on every single page because he or she has more room to help you understand the story, the message, what have you. So, to help you better understand a short story, please read the foreword and the introduction. It's the first thing I did when I picked up this book. And it definitely helped me understand not only what Zora Neale Hurston is about, what I'm going to be experiencing when I read each story, and also just main themes to look out for while I'm reading, which would be gender roles, sexism, colorism, racism. So just by reading the foreword and the introduction, they basically did the work for me. Now I can just read the story and know what to look out for, and it's easy, breezy, fun. But one thing I did want to read to you guys from the introduction, because you can't really understand the author's words if you don't understand the author, right? So just this one line, it says, "Imitation of white traditions," she cautions, "will do nothing to advance the race, as pupils never stand on equal footing with the master." So just from reading that out of the introduction, we know that Zora is not writing to get a seat at the table. We already know that. So we already have that in our minds when we're reading the short story, which will help us annotate, which will help us better to retain the information. And that is one thing that I learned in college. I had this English class that was so great, this writing class that really helped me improve my reading skills and habits, to be honest. But my professor taught us that there can be one quote you can find in a short story or in a chapter, and you could literally write a whole paper on that one quote. So in annotating this, seriously, you can. When I first heard that, I don't know if I'm tripping. When I first heard that, I was like, how am I supposed to write like a whole paper on one quote? But you really can, because it forces you to really understand the significance of what that author is saying. So in this, what I would do, because I did not annotate in this book because it's so pretty, I do have standards. What I would do is underline whatever I thought was most important from that story, from the few defining moments that each character has in the short story, because it is so short. I would underline that. I would write it down in a book that's specifically for taking notes on books, and then I would just do a short paragraph or a page so I can better understand everything that I've underlined, if that makes sense. And I'm going to put it on the screen for you guys, like the notes that I took and how you can expand upon that. So not only is this going to help you annotate, but if you have to write out a paper on what you're annotating, the paper is basically already done. So you guys try that out and you let me know, because that is one of the biggest things that helped me in my writing classes in college. The last book I'll go over with you guys is The Paths to Love by Deepak Chopra. And I chose this book a self-help book specifically, because I think this is what most people are reading outside of college. Once you graduate, I feel like most people go towards self-help and business because it's a new chapter of life. We're learning different things. So in this book, To Annotate, this one was a little bit easier, which I liked, because if you go through, and I will try to show you the best that I can, he already highlights and italicizes almost everything that he finds important. So you don't really need to do that. So what I would do is, let's say, this is italicized. It says, instead of resisting any emotion, the best way to dispel it is to enter it fully, embrace it, and see through your resistance. Wow. That was good. I hope y'all were listening. So what I would do, because I really liked that, I'm an arrow drawer. I would draw an arrow to that and just leave it at that. Because I feel like with self-help books, honestly, this is a book where almost on every page, you're going to want to underline everything. And there's no point in underlining everything and highlighting everything. So what I like to do in that case, so like for this paragraph, I know I underlined that because I really like that line, and then I finished the paragraph and I was like, oh my God, I love the whole thing, and I did a whole bracket. So I'll do something like that. So then when I'm flipping through again to reread it, I'll be like, oh, why did I bracket off this whole paragraph? Let me reread that. And then I can be like, what was the significance of that? And then that's how you annotate from there. So that's what I did with this book. Also, this has different sections in the book. So on your path to love, you have to start with self-love. Then you go to your relationship with your partner, or relationships with your friends. Then it gets into the ecstasy that you feel once you've gone on this path of self-love. That was a very short synopsis. I'll do a book review on this one day. But so you can also look at it that way. So you can go through each section and it's like, okay, I'm done with the section on the path. So I'm going to go back and read all the notes, the little notes that I took on the path, and then I'm going to get my notebook if you really want to do this to really retain the information. Then I'm going to get my notebook and I'm going to write all the notes I took on the path. Once I understand the path, I can get into the spirit of romance, because that's the whole next section, and he's giving you tips and tricks on the spirit of romance, and then you go forward that way. Because I think, especially with self-help, I think that's when you want to get the most out of your reading, right? You definitely want to stop and take notes throughout. This is where I really don't think it's most appropriate to read the whole book and go back, just because, like I said, there's truly gems on almost every single page. So unless you have the whole book memorized, I don't know how you're gonna really retain that. So for self-help, self-love, whatever it is that you're into that's about the self, about building yourself, I would take the annotating a little more seriously. Because even though you're not getting a grade, it's about your life. All right, y'all. So after watching this video, you guys should be able to annotate effectively, regardless of the book that you are reading. And the two main things that you always need to remember, if it's two things that y'all leave this video with, is to please read the introduction, the foreword, the preface, the preface, anything at the beginning of the book that you probably don't want to read that, okay? Because it's going to help you. And also remember that you are annotating to understand the material, not to say whether you like or dislike the material, okay? Just those two. That's not two, that's four. Breathe easy, friends.